my company, Dakota Radio Solutions. Let's get into it. The managing team would be me. I'm a computer networking student. I go to Dakota State University. I'm in my senior year, done in a couple weeks here, so excited to be done. I've done ham radio with my brother and friends. We all got our licenses before we got to college. That's kind of how we got into that whole world. My brother Brady, high school student, also graduates this year. He has been doing eBay for 5 years, heavily into sales, and has local connections and has been all involved in that for almost 6 years now. And he also has his ham radio license. And the main issue we're trying to solve is radio coverage in southeastern South Dakota is suboptimal and expensive, and we're here to fix that, mainly in the Canton area, Canton south of Sioux Falls, and in the Moe area, because that's what we found geographically to be our target market. We'll get a little bit more into that later. But we'd be covering almost that whole area. What is a radio repeater? Let's get into the technical part. Because, as the name says, it repeats. It listens on one frequency, transmits on another. You know, every public safety officer, you know, any of that, construction, ag, that's big in that area, and they have these. It's more of a location game. So, you know, you've got a couple of radios here on the far right. You know, not as good line of sight. Repeaters higher up, you can hear it. Good reception, you can still hear it. In the trees, you can hear it. The goal is to have as much coverage as possible. So if they can't talk individually, peer-to-peer, it's good to have a backbone like that and link it up together. Now, where we can cover, I've scouted out 2 sites, but this is the main one I'm going to talk about today. It is near Moe. That is around 10, 12 miles from Canton South. The coverage area is as shows right there. As you can see, it's actually covered per million. The yellow is kind of where it gets spotty. That is a really conservative estimate of range. I'm not a data analytics person by any stretch of it, but you can see that it would cover that area quite heavily. We've researched customers starting at the location site, which is the purple little bit right there. And we've started locally looking for customers that would meet that area because, you know, if it's a tower, the lower you put it, you want to have it where it's, you know, if it's a customer that's only within maybe 15 miles of the site, they don't need to hear all the way up to the moon. That's wasted potential, and that's also with how the FCC does it, that's a little bit more expensive for the licensing. We can also link the sites. I've got one listening node in Sioux Falls. It's relatively closer to downtown. As you know, downtown Sioux Falls, lots of metal. We've done tons of testing. The new building they put up, Sharapa, downtown, that's got quite a bit of you know, metal there, and that blocks out a considerable chunk for how it is laid up on the hill. So we've done a lot of technical testing, and we've had people that have sent in their data on how far out they can hear this. Our solution. Our goal is to build and deploy low-cost radio systems for rural communities using proven methods. So what that is for more or less, we pass the used equipment discount that we get onto the customers. I've found quite a few people that have it where they can easily supply us with a supply of these radio repeaters on the left, as well as the parts to maintain them. Usually the shelf life for those is 20 years. It's more or less how the FCC deems the trend going. So with 5G, you know, the spectrum moves around and things can go obsolete, but usually about 20 years for anything we would even consider implementing, as well as 10 to 15 years of constantly produced parts. We're more or less a broker of radio repeater systems and the tower location. We do pretty much all beginning to end. It's pretty much all the same level anyway. We would go up and help you find out, let's say you're a rural customer near Canton on the south side. You know, you've got a farm, there's plenty of company farms over there. We would say, okay, you need this, you know, you need this much coverage. How high in the tower can we do it? What's the fees going to be for licensing it with the FCC? You can either do it yourself and buy the system and put it up on a grain silo yourself, or we can climb up there and do that for you. And then we try to figure out, okay, what integrations do you want? Do you want to have it where it connects to your phone and, you know, you've got a pager on this tower and you've Let's say something goes on the farm, let's say the grain silo, you're filling it up and you want to know how full it is, where a certain truck is. Okay, we can integrate into a pager, we can integrate into Wear OS through Google. There's plenty of integrations, where it goes to a smartphone app. There's plenty of different things that can be added onto these with little to no cost, except for the time on us, which is then given to the customer. There's so many modules that I can't even really go on over them all day, but and you can cater them to any need. We've purchased the Motorola Developer Kit to where we can whip up almost anything anyone could ask for, as long as it's legally feasible with how spectrum laws work and how how much they can actually afford to pay. Marketing. Well, we would have a website with all our information, but the real kicker is the FCC already has a database of anyone who's had a radio system and anyone who's filed to want one but hasn't actually put anything up. So you exactly know who your target market is and where they're at. And combining that with, because you have to put your address in, combining this with like ArcGIS to the Sioux Falls and Minnehaha, you can see who different landowners are. Is it a company farm? Okay. How many parcels of land do they own? You can kind of have an idea of who would be a customer and who wouldn't. So with that, they can come to you, but more or less you would go to the select customers and you would seek them out yourself. Oftentimes we know well before they actually want to be a customer if they're in the market for that sort of thing. If you're a small mom and pop farm, maybe you could go with one on a grain silo. We could definitely hook you up with that, but we're more catering towards the mid to larger company farms around there, so that's our target demographic. The revenue streams, the sale of physical repeater hardware and radio hardware, the service of the installation, putting it up, climbing out there. If you'd like to have a radio in your car, we'll drill a hole in the top, put a little mount on there, and we'll get you all hooked up just like how if you think of a police car. Leasing out of tower space, I've found 3 sites that would be willing to let us put up stuff there. But the one in Mo is pretty much fair game. Their cost for putting that up, I think, is $25 a month. So that's pennies on the dollar. Because Sioux Falls, in parts of Sioux Falls, that's $200, $300 a month. That's significantly more expensive. And the continued support of involving our radio systems. Would you like to have this integrated? Would you like more clients? Even though when people think radio, they think like FM radio. Well, that's more analog. Well, this is mostly digital nowadays. So it's the routing of internet traffic with an analog backbone built in. So it's highly technical in that nature. Pricing sentiment, we've conducted research that most radio repeater installs are between $2,500 and $5,000. That includes the FCC licensing, the install, and 5 or so radios put throughout for the $2,500. But it's a range of whatever they would expect to pay for their particular install. And since there's so many modules that can be catered in, it's quite a varied range. But usually it's almost always above $2,500. We would charge between $100 at our lowest price point and $500 for continued support. Most people that actually go with that, they just want to pay it and not think about it. They don't want to deal with the technical climbing aspect. With the FCC filing and whatnot, that is a legal thing that you would get into, and most people just don't want to deal with that because they don't understand what goes up. They just want to know that it works, set it and forget it. And that's where we cater to all of that. Maintaining a difference, well, how do we keep our advantage? Well, there's 3 different companies in South Dakota that actually play a role in this, and they're spread pretty darn thin. And Canton so happens to be the right area to be for geographical reasons. Keeping our advantage, what would we do? Well, we've got distributors where we can get secondhand equipment for these lower tiered customers. We're not going to be catering to state employees because that comes with its own group of legal issues. But we do more or less just ag entities and then scale out from there. So pretty much our price point is what makes us different because we are well under what anyone else would call. So there's a group in Sioux Falls that does this, there's a group in Rapid, and then there's a smaller group in Sioux Falls that is one of our distributors of getting our equipment, because they only cater to the bigger and the better, and once the 10 years of life is out on one, it's gone, and no matter what. So even if it's just working, it's gone, and no one will want it if you're a bigger company. But if you're a small farm, hey, why not? And location matters. Mo has proven to be the best for starting and scaling out, mostly because you can get a pretty darn good amount of customers in that one area. And we've also looked into our future team of people that do networking, people that do the climbing and whatnot. I don't necessarily do the climbing, but I know people that can and that have done that for me before. So let's go next. Our cost structure, if we did get the prize money. Repeater purchase fund would be $4,000 just to have some stuff on standby. They're all about the same. You can integrate it in multiple different ways, and if you have a varied selection. We have some repeaters on standby, but it would be nice to have a pillow of sorts so we're not pulling from our own amount of funds. Transmission cable, you got to run it up the tower. The antenna doesn't work wirelessly, so that's solid copper on the inside. That gets to be rather expensive. The FCC licensing fund, that's just $1,000. That's pretty generous for that. That's just assuming there's a hiccup along the way. If we file it wrong and have to refile, that's $200 a pop. So that'd leave us 5 customers to pull from with that fund. Transportation costs, Mo isn't too far, and driving up to Madison makes me cry a little bit more on the gas prices, but just going there and back and transporting up the stuff, we found with our distributors in Sioux Falls, it's not that hard to get a hold of stuff. 5 miles or so is not that big of a deal. But going out, let's say in the winter, and a customer has an issue, having to go drive up to your farm and go on your silo or go on the tower and fix something, that gets a little bit troublesome, and that's more or less wear and tear. And then the legal and organizational stuff to file for an LLC and some more FCC-related credentials to say, all right, we can be a broker of that. And yeah, that's more or less just saying, I accept the liability of this, here's what I'm doing to stop it, and then it's on you for keeping up with it. There's no HIPAA, there's no anything like that of anyone inspecting or checking. It's all on the broker. Labor projection breakdown on what we would have year one. We try to increase monthly sales as much as possible. No more than 10 monthly contracted customers. That's just for scaling wise. 10 would cover the cost of, if we even were to own the site, that would cover all the taxes and whatnot. That would also, that would pretty much subsidize everything else. 1 part-time employee, which more or less would be me, at $15 an hour for 12 hours a week. That's more hours than you would ever need. Or if I was just the owner and had a part-time under me, $250 a month for myself. Addition of employees, 1 full-time employee, 17 at 40, then it scales up from there for growing coverage. On year 3 is when we would decide to move out, because that would be, you can only put so much on a tower. And as, I guess if you came into Vermilion today, you noticed quite a few coming in, if you paid attention. And those get pretty packed, so you have to spread out, otherwise you've reached your peak potential for that given site. And the more you have, the lower the insurance goes to, so it's within our best interest to scale out at a given point. Projections, this graph shows the average site insurance costing $2,500. You don't necessarily need insurance. That is only if you own the land, and let's say if it was a water tower or anything else in between, you don't need to pay the insurance because you're not the landowner. So the goal would be for the first year to try to stay away from that as much as possible. If it's just an added expense, and while we're trying to grow our smaller customers in the beginning within the Mo area, it would be not within our best interest. The average cost per customer is $200. That's also a very conservative estimate, because before I said between $200 and $500. So that's saying 10 customers for the first year, 20 for the first, assuming insurance, and then so on. The expenses that you actually have to pay for this, or more or less a broker infrastructure, is very little. It's a one-set thing. You can have one install of a system, and you can have it be shared by multiple users. So let's say we put up a thing in Mo right now. It could harbor 8 users in one go for $1,500 per year of, expenses. That's not bad. Thank you. Any questions?
We have 5 minutes for questions, judges.
You know I've got some, right?
I know you've got them.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna throw them real fast then.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so you're talking about radio spectrum, so ham radio spectrum, so you're on digital communications.
More or less business. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why not? Why not go into private 4G LTE or private 5G?
From what I've seen with the towers around there, it's going to take Canton growing a little bit more and Sioux Falls expanding out a little bit more for them to want to do it, because at some point the towers in the outer part
But if they
are
haven't
in the
done it,
neighborhood.
but if they haven't done it yet, you'd be the one to do it.
I would be the one to do it, yeah, and that would be
So,
good.
so I got a couple pieces of advice for you, as well as ask some questions. Okay. So you're not looking at wanting to own the towers?
If at all possible, yeah, I'd like to stay away from that unless
Okay.
it's advantageous for us.
Why? Because the business value isn't like owning a tower and then leasing off the
It's just an
space?
added expense that,
Okay.
if can be avoided, would be nice.
But financially, it doesn't make sense to own a tower?
If you needed to, it would, but it
Okay.
does not make
I mean,
sense.
have you done the business analytics on that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
The
right.
land is more or less what you want in terms of that, because at some point you'll expand and you want to sell that.
Yeah, okay. So I think Radio Solutions, the name of it is a little dated, okay? You're an IoT company. Okay, as you were having this conversation, you were talking about sensors sitting inside the silos, could be cameras, could be moisture sensors, could be rainfall sensors, could be ground, detection, any of that stuff. Those are all things, and they gotta be connected in one way. You've got a really cool model because it's equipment that can definitely work within that range. Chances are your customers won't know the level of bandwidth that they have. So they're gonna ask you questions like, well, why should we go with something like this versus, something along those lines. Motorola's a great company to work with. Another company I recommend that you look at is Cradlepoint.
Okay.
If you haven't seen who Cradlepoint is, it is a private 5G, 4G LTE that also uses cellular SIM cards that you can plug into it, reach back through the internet, no matter where you're at, right? They work great. And, I'm going to speak, so you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me questions, whatever. But they're owned by Ericsson.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay? So you know who Ericsson is.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what about encryption and security?
If the customer wants it,
Okay.
in most scenarios rural, no one cares. So,
I think everyone's going to care.
yeah.
So I mean, I'll offer that. That's another.
Yeah, that's something that's
That's
awesome.
another revenue
Yeah.
stream for you, right?
Yeah.
Because look at your 1 through 3 year projections. Do you want this to be your full-time job 3 years from now?
Yeah.
I love the fact that your projections are realistic.
Yeah.
Right? So you're gonna sacrifice some time and stuff to be able to do that.
Yeah. I try to keep it rather conservative.
Also, look at Blue Planet. It's owned by a company called Sienna Networks. They do large wide area equipment. They have a tool for antenna placement.
I've used an offshoot of something similar.
Yeah, so look at that. But you're an IoT company.
Okay.
You're not a radio company,
So,
okay?
any idea of changing the name that you would think?
I have no idea
Okay,
right
there's something
now.
on
I mean,
it.
you put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Go to ChatGPT. But no.
Okay.
But I mean, seriously, this
Yeah.
is really cool. But I would definitely look at that. The other thing is you're looking at a $4,000 upfront cost on that equipment. I'd go to like G Capital into a lease.
Yeah.
You'll drop your $4,000 cost to like $100 a month, and then you can.
Not bad at all. Yeah.
And some of your legal costs were actually a little bit low for your startup.
Coming
Just
from-
Okay.
Yeah, that's about an hour's worth, right?
Okay.
So, but no.
Yeah, up it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the one last thing, and I know I keep talking about NVIDIA, but man, you guys are like throwing into that industry. Look at Project Ariel, AERIAL. They have open sourced software defined 5G that runs on a GPU.
There's a class in this school that talks about it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
okay.
it just came out, they just released it, but imagine instead of having a Motorola radio, having a small Dell IoT server sitting anywhere on the facility, not even on a tower.
You can mesh it.
Then throwing up an antenna and getting 1,000 feet of, 5G connectivity, local, and all those IoT devices, and then develop a subscription model. So, anyway, thank you for that.
Thank you.
That's really cool.
Yeah, small, name change, definitely. Think bigger.
Yeah.
If
Bigger than
you're
that.
thinking that 3 years, go,
Go with
where do you want to be?
Yeah.
Is it all communities across the country, or is it only South Dakota, that area?
Yeah. Whatever we can mesh it out as to cover
And
West
and
End.
collect all that data and then go to those towns again and say, this is what I do here, this is what they benefited from, this is the financial model, because it's affordable, which makes it very enticing to people who own farms that are, trying to
Yeah.
figure out the costs. All right, so
Cool.
you have time.
Sure did.
Well, thank you.
Very good.